40,000 soldiers, armed, silent, marching in a single column around a fortress so ancient it had watched civilizations rise and fall for 10,000 years. Not one of them speaks. Not one draws a sword. But the walls of Jericho, walls that had stood for millennia, walls that rose 30 feet into the sky, are about to collapse, and no human hand will touch them. What happened at Jericho was not a battle. It was something the ancient world had never witnessed and would never witness again. What happened at Jericho was not a battle. Today, we're going inside those walls, inside the silence, inside the 7 days that shattered the most impregnable fortress in Canaan and revealed a truth so bone-chilling, it still echoes into your life right now. But to understand what happened at Jericho, you have to understand what happened before any soldier took a single step. The year was approximately 1406 BC. The Israelites stood on the western bank of the Jordan River, staring at the land God had promised their ancestors 400 years earlier. Behind them, the wilderness. 40 years of sand, death, and waiting. An entire generation buried in unmarked graves across the desert because they refused to believe God could do what He said He would do. Now their children stood at the edge of Canaan, and blocking the entrance to everything God had promised was a city called Jericho. This was no ordinary city. Jericho was one of the oldest continuously inhabited places on the face of the earth. The spring of Ain es Sultan had drawn human settlement to this spot for nearly 11,000 years. Archaeologists have unearthed more than 20 successive civilizations layered on top of each other in the ruins. Empires rose and crumbled, and Jericho endured. And its defenses were terrifying. A massive stone retaining wall stood 12 to 15 feet high at the base. On top of that, a mud brick wall 6 feet thick, extending another 13 to 15 feet upward. An attacking army on the plains would face a sheer vertical barrier of 25 to 30 feet of solid stone and brick. And that was only the outer wall. A second wall rose higher up the slope, protecting the inner city. Moses had described the Canaanite cities as having walls that reached to the sky. Standing on the plains of Jericho, looking up at that fortress, his words would not have felt like exaggeration. And Joshua, the man tasked with breaking through those walls, had never commanded a siege in his life. He had been Moses' assistant, a spy, a soldier. But Moses was dead. Aaron was dead. Miriam was dead. Every leader Joshua had ever followed was gone. He was the last man standing from the generation that had walked out of Egypt. And now 40,000 Israelites were looking at him, waiting for him to tell them how to take an impenetrable city with no siege equipment, no experience, and no plan. But before Joshua could approach those walls, God asked him to do something that no military commander in history would ever consider. The Israelites had crossed the Jordan on dry ground, the river parting before the Ark of the Covenant, just as the Red Sea had parted before Moses. They set up camp at Gilgal, on the open plains east of Jericho. The walls of the city were visible from the camp, close, watching. And God spoke to Joshua, but He did not say, "Sharpen your swords." He did not say, "Build siege ramps." He did not say, "Prepare for war." He said, "Make flint knives and circumcise the sons of Israel a second time." Joshua 5:2. The generation born in the wilderness, the men who would fight, had never been circumcised. For 40 years of wandering, the physical sign of the Abrahamic covenant had been neglected. And God would not allow an unconsecrated army to fight a consecrated war. Think about what this means for one soldier. He is maybe 20 years old, born in the desert, raised on manna and the stories of a land he has never seen. He has spent his entire youth training to fight, sharpening bronze, learning formations, hardening his body for the war everyone told him was coming. He can see the walls of Jericho from where he stands. He can count the Canaanite soldiers on the ramparts. And God's first command is not advance. It is lie down and be cut. The flint knife is crude, the pain is blinding, and when it is over, he lies on the ground in the open plain, unable to stand, unable to walk, unable to hold a weapon. The walls of Jericho shimmer in the heat on the horizon. If the Canaanites come now, he will die on his back in the dirt before he ever sets foot in the Promised Land. He has to choose. Not whether God is real, he watched the Jordan part 3 days ago, but whether God is trustworthy with the things that cost the most. Joshua stood at the edge of the camp the evening after the circumcision. The groaning of thousands of men drifted across the plain. Soldiers who should have been drilling for an assault, lying in rows like wounded men after a battle that had not yet happened. The walls of Jericho stood unchanged on the horizon. My entire army on the ground, the enemy right there. And God says, wait. But he had spent 40 years watching what happened when Israel decided God's timing was wrong. He waited. When the healing was complete, the Lord spoke. Today I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you. Joshua 5:9. Rolled away. Not the slavery itself, that had ended at the Red Sea. The reproach, the identity, the way a man walks when he has spent his entire life being told he is property. The way a nation thinks when its deepest memory is the sound of a whip. Rolled away. They were no longer former slaves. They were the army of the living God. And then they celebrated Passover, the first Passover in the Promised Land, the same ritual their parents had performed the night God struck Egypt, the blood on the doorposts, the lamb, the unleavened bread, a beginning that echoed a beginning. The day after Passover, they ate the produce of Canaan for the first time, unleavened cakes, parched grain, food that came from the ground beneath their feet instead of the sky above their heads. And the manna stopped. After 40 years of bread falling from heaven every morning, the provision simply ceased. No warning, no gradual decrease. It just ended. Joshua 5:12. God removed the supernatural safety net at the exact moment his people needed it most. No more passive receiving. From this day forward, every meal would require labor, every harvest would require faith, and every battle would require participation. God was stripping everything. Military readiness, taken. Supernatural provision, taken. And he was not finished. The manna was gone, the wounds were healing. And Joshua walked toward Jericho alone, where he was about to meet someone who would change everything he understood about this war. He saw the figure near the city, a man, standing still, a drawn sword in his hand. The late afternoon sun sat low over the Jordan Valley, stretching the stranger's shadow long across the cracked earth. The air smelled of dust and the mineral tang of the nearby springs. Joshua's hand went to his own weapon. He approached the way a general approaches an unknown contact in hostile territory, direct, commanding, assessing the threat. Are you for us or for our adversaries? Joshua 5:13. Friend or enemy? Binary, simple. The kind of question a man in control asks. The answer shattered the question. No. Not, yes, I am on your side. Not, I am your enemy. Just, no. Neither option, both wrong. But I'm the commander of the army of the Lord. Now I have come. Joshua 5:14. The commander of the army of the Lord. Not a messenger, not a scout, the commander. And the sword in his hand was not decorative. It was drawn, ready. Joshua had walked to that meeting as a general assessing his options. In a single sentence, he discovered he was a lieutenant who had just met his commanding officer. I came here to survey the battlefield, but this is not my battlefield. It was never my battlefield. The commander spoke again. Take off your sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy. Joshua 5:15. The same words, the exact same command God gave Moses at the burning bush decades earlier. Holy ground. Not a temple, not an altar, a battlefield. God was declaring that the ground where war would be waged was sacred space, that what was about to happen was not a military campaign, it was an act of worship. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshiped. No argument, no request for proof, no negotiation. A commander trained in warfare dropped face first into the dirt before a figure whose authority he recognized instantly. That is the moment the general died, and the servant was born. Have you ever walked into a situation absolutely certain you were in charge and discovered that God had a completely different chain of command? Joshua rose from the dust with a new understanding of who was fighting this war. But nothing could have prepared him for the battle plan he was about to receive. The plan was simple, and it was insane. March around the city once a day for 6 days. 7 priests, carrying 7 trumpets made of ram's horns, walking before the Ark of the Covenant. The armed men in front and behind, not as an assault force, but as an honor guard for the presence of God. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times. Then the priests blow a long blast. Then everyone shouts. That was the plan. No battering rams, no siege towers, no scaling ladders, no tunnels, no arrows, no swords. March, blow horns, shout. Joshua listened, and as the instructions unfolded, something in the architecture of the command began to surface. 7 priests, 7 trumpets, 7 days, 7 circuits on the 7th day, 7 upon 7 upon 7. He knew that number. Every Israelite did. God had rested on the 7th day because creation was complete, full, finished, perfect. Nothing could be added, nothing needed. And now God was weaving that same number into every detail of this battle plan. He is telling me this is already finished. The walls are already down. I just can't see it yet. But he did not argue. Not one recorded word of protest. Compare this with Moses, who argued at the burning bush. Compare with Gideon, who demanded signs. Jonah ran in the opposite direction. Joshua simply obeyed. The silence of his acceptance was as powerful as the silence he was about to demand from his army. The oldest priest in the company received his instrument that evening. Not the polished silver trumpet, the chatsotsra, used by armies for tactical signals. This was a shofar, a ram's horn, curved, rough, dark with age. He held it in both hands and turned it slowly. His thumb traced the bend in the horn, the bend that every Israelite boy was taught to remember. The horn bends the way the human heart should bend, in humility, in submission, before the Lord. But the shofar carried a deeper memory still. On Mount Moriah, centuries earlier, Abraham had raised the knife over his son Isaac, and God had provided a ram, caught in the thicket by its horns. The shofar was made from that horn. The priest ran his finger along the curve and felt the weight of it. Not the weight of bone, but the weight of what this instrument declared. Every blast would be an echo of Moriah. Every note would say what Abraham learned on the mountain. God provides. God substitutes. God saves. His hands were trembling, not from age, from the weight of what he was about to carry into battle. And then came the command that tested the army more than any enemy ever could. Do not give a war cry. Do not raise your voices. Do not say a word until the day I tell you to shout. Then shout. Joshua 6:10. Silence. Absolute, total, complete. An entire army, 40,000 men, marching in formation around an enemy fortress without uttering a single word. For 6 consecutive days. Not a battle cry, not a whispered prayer, not a complaint. This was the generation born to parents famous for one thing above all others: complaining. The wilderness generation grumbled at the Red Sea, grumbled about water, grumbled about food, grumbled about leadership, grumbled about the land. Their complaining had cost them everything: 40 years, their homes, their lives. Their children marched in silence. The reproach of Egypt was indeed rolled away. On the walls of Jericho, the Canaanite defenders watched, and what they saw terrified them more than any army ever could. Day 1. A soldier stands on the wall of Jericho. He has defended this city his entire life. He knows siege warfare the way a farmer knows seasons, instinctively in his bones. He knows what battering rams sound like, the rhythmic, splintering impact against the gate. He knows what tunneling feels like, the faint vibrations beneath his feet as sappers dig toward the foundations. He knows what a night raid looks like, the sudden chaos of torches and screaming in the dark. He knows war. But what he sees below is not war. A massive army, fully armed, marching in a column around his city. No siege equipment, no formations for assault, just men walking. And priests blowing horns made of animal bone. And in the center of the procession, a golden box carried on poles that catches the sun at the exact same angle every day at the exact same point in the circuit. Like a clock measuring something he cannot read. They circle the city once. The horns stop. The army returns to their camp. No attack, no demands, no communication of any kind. Day 2, the same thing. Day 3, the same. Day 4, the same. If they would just attack, I could fight. I know how to fight. I was trained to fight. I don't know how to stand on this wall and wait for something I can't even name. He watches the dust rise from the march, a thin amber cloud that lifts from 40,000 sandals and drifts to exactly the height of the wall's base, no higher, as if even the dust knows its boundary. And between the trumpet blasts, a silence that pushes against the stone like a living thing, the silence of a predator that is in no hurry because it already knows the outcome. On the 5th morning, he notices his hands are shaking, not from cold, not from fatigue, from something he has never felt on this wall before. The feeling that he is standing on the wrong side of a door that is about to open. Inside the wall, in a house built directly into the fortification, where the stone of Jericho formed one side of a family home, Rahab sat by the window. Night 4. Her family was asleep. Her father's breathing was heavy and labored in the next room. Her brothers lay against the far wall, arms crossed, jaws tight even in sleep. The children, her nieces, her nephews, had stopped asking questions 2 days ago. They just watched her now with round, dark eyes, waiting for her to tell them it would be all right. The scarlet cord hung from the window frame, a thin red line against the brown mud brick, barely moving in the night air. She reached out and touched it. The fibers were rough under her fingers. Such a small thing, thread and dye. She had tied it there the night the 2 Israelite spies had escaped through this same window, the night she had chosen a God she had never seen over a city she had known her entire life. She had told the spies, "I know that the Lord your God, He is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath." Joshua 2:11. She had said it with conviction. She had believed it with her whole chest. But saying those words to 2 strangers in the dark is one thing. Believing them on night 4, with the walls still standing, the army still circling, and her brother's voice still echoing from the argument at dinner. "You destroyed us for nothing, Rahab. You betrayed your own people for a fairy tale."
Brought shame upon us.
The walls are still standing. Believing on night 4 is something else entirely. She looked out the window. The Israelite campfires flickered on the plain below, hundreds of them scattered like fallen stars. Somewhere down there, 2 men had sworn an oath. When the city falls, everyone inside the house marked by the scarlet cord will live. When? Not if. When? But the walls are still standing, and I am sitting inside one of them. She closed her eyes. She held the cord. She chose, again, to believe what she could not see. There is a kind of waiting that is harder than fighting, the silence of trusting when everything in you wants to take control. 6 sunsets, 6 silent marches, and then came the 7th day. They rose before the sun. Joshua 6:15 says they rose early at the dawning of the day. The sky over the Jordan Valley would have been the color of iron, gray, cold, the stars still fading. Desert mornings in the Rift Valley drop sharply. The soldiers' breath hung visible in the pre-dawn air. Dew clung to the tent ropes and to the leather of their sandals. The first circuit began in near darkness. The ark gleamed faintly, torchlight catching the gold between the outstretched wings of the cherubim. The old priest lifted the shofar to his lips. His lips were cracked now, split from 5 days of dry blasts against curved bone. His lungs ached in a place deeper than muscle. But he pressed the horn to his mouth and blew. The note cracked at the edges, rough and raw, and it carried across the still morning air toward the walls that had not moved. First circuit, the walls stood. Second circuit, the same. On the ramparts, the Canaanite soldiers realized something had changed. The army was not stopping, not returning to camp. Third circuit, fourth. The sentries began calling to each other along the wall, sharp, nervous voices breaking the silence that the Israelites themselves refused to break. Fifth circuit. Joshua's legs burned. The sun was climbing now, pressing its full weight onto the back of his neck. Sweat traced lines through the dust on his face. The leather of his right sandal had worn thin on the inside edge. 6 days of circling the same path, the same wall, the same stones, grinding the soul down to almost nothing. The walls towered above him on his left. The same mud brick, the same retaining stones. Not a crack, not a tremor, not a single pebble dislodged. 5 times around, and nothing. 6 times, and nothing. But he kept walking, 1 foot in front of the other, because the commander had not said stop. 6th circuit. The old priest's lungs were fire. The horn tasted of salt, his own blood from his cracked lips mixing with the bone. He looked at the ark behind him. The gold still caught the light. The presence was still there. He kept blowing. 7th circuit complete. The sun was fully up now, blazing off the stone retaining wall, turning the mud brick the color of dried blood. The priests stopped. Every man stopped. 40,000 soldiers standing in formation around a city that had not moved. The old priest raised the shofar 1 final time. He pressed it to his bleeding lips, drew a breath that reached to the bottom of his chest, and blew. A long, piercing, sustained blast. Not a melody, not a rhythm. A single, unbroken note, raw and ancient and terrible, rising from a curved ram's horn and rolling across the Jordan Valley like the voice of something older than the stones themselves. The note held, and held, and held. until the old man's lungs were empty and the silence that followed was louder than the blast. And then Joshua opened his mouth and gave the command that no military academy in the history of the world would ever teach. "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." Joshua 6:16. Has given. Past tense. Already done. The city was already theirs before the first stone moved. The shout was not a request. It was a receipt. And 40,000 voices, 6 days of silence compressed into a single detonation of sound, erupted across the plain. The ground shook. Not a tremor, a convulsion. The earth beneath the walls of Jericho heaved, as if something beneath it had broken loose, as if the foundations themselves had heard the name of their maker and let go. The mud brick wall, 6 feet thick, 15 feet tall, mortared and sun-baked and ancient, began to move. Not inward, the way battering rams push a wall, outward. The top of the wall pitched forward, away from the city, and the entire structure came apart. Thousands of tons of mud brick cracking, sliding, cascading outward down the slope of the tell in a thundering avalanche of stone and dust. Bricks that had held their place for generations tumbling over each other like they were racing to reach the ground. The dust rose in a wall of its own, amber and choking and so thick the sun turned into a dim orange disk hanging in the haze. The sound was not a crash, it was a roar. Stone grinding against stone, brick shattering against the retaining wall at the base. The sound came from the ground and filled the sky and shook the ribs of every man standing on the plain. And then, silence. A silence so sudden and so total that it felt like the world had stopped breathing. The dust hung motionless in the air. 40,000 men stood frozen. No one moved, no one spoke. For 2 heartbeats, maybe 3, the only sound was the faint ticking of small stones still settling in the rubble. Every soldier stared at what God had done. The wall was gone. The fortress that had guarded the entrance to Canaan for millennia, gone. Reduced to a slope of broken mud brick piled against the stone base. And the rubble had formed a ramp. The collapsed bricks, thousands of tons of them fallen outward and downward, had piled against the 15-foot stone retaining wall, creating a rough, chaotic, but unmistakable staircase from the plain to the top of the mound. The impenetrable barrier had become an entrance. The wall that was supposed to keep them out had laid itself down to let them in. One soldier took the first step onto the rubble, then another, then the charge. And the people went up into the city, every man straight before him. Joshua 6:20. No ladders, no ropes, no siege equipment. They walked straight up the rubble and into the city. Every man straight before him. The miracle had not only destroyed the defense, it had built the entrance. But inside the wall, inside one specific section of the wall, a woman held her breath. Rahab felt the collapse before she heard it. The vibration came through the floor first, a deep, gut-level shudder that rattled the jars on her shelves and knocked dust from the ceiling onto the sleeping children. Then the sound. To her left, the thunder of falling stone, masonry that had stood for generations disintegrating in seconds. She heard individual bricks separating from each other, a sound like bones cracking multiplied 1,000 times. To her right, the same. The roar on both sides of her, closing in, the wall coming apart like a body tearing itself open. Her mother screamed. Her brothers threw themselves over the children. Dust poured through the cracks in the ceiling so thick she could taste it, chalite and earth and the mineral grit of ancient mortar. And Rahab looked at the scarlet cord. It hung from the window, thin and red against the chaos, the most fragile thing in a world that was collapsing. The walls on either side of her had fallen. The wall beneath her feet trembled. Every law of physics, every structural principle, every logical expectation said that her section should have been the first to go. A residential house built into a defensive wall, weakened by a window, marked by a rope. The weakest point in the entire fortification, but her walls held. The roaring stopped, the dust swirled and began to thin, and through the window, past the scarlet cord, Rahab saw the Israelite soldiers climbing the rubble on either side of her home, climbing up to the city, climbing past the one section that still stood. Her brother, the one who had called her a traitor, the one who had said the walls would never fall, was staring at the window, at the cord, at the soldiers streaming past on either side. His mouth was open. No words came. Rahab's hands were still on the cord, her fingers white against the red thread. She looked at the line of crimson hanging against the brown mud brick and the gray dust and the pale morning light. And for the first time in 7 days, she breathed. He kept his word. The God of Israel kept his word. The 2 spies came for her. Joshua had given the order, bring her out, bring everyone under the scarlet cord, alive. They brought out Rahab, her father, her mother, her brothers, and all who belonged to her. Everyone gathered in the house marked by the thin red line, Joshua 6:23. A Canaanite woman, a prostitute, a traitor to her own city, saved, not because of who she was, but because of what she believed.
The writer of Hebrews would say it plainly, centuries later. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell down after they had been encircled for 7 days. Hebrews 11:30. And in the very next breath, by faith, Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient. Hebrews 11:31. 2 verses, side by side. The walls fell by faith. Rahab survived by faith. Judgment and grace, operating simultaneously, powered by the same force, on the same wall. Think about that for a moment, because the story doesn't end there. After the walls fell, Joshua declared the Hedem, the ban of total destruction. Everything in Jericho was to be devoted to the Lord. A young Israelite soldier walked through the burning city. Smoke stung his eyes. The heat pressed against his face like a hand. And then he saw them, the grain jars, row after row of large clay vessels, some taller than his waist, filled to the brim with barley and wheat. More grain than he had ever seen in one place. He had eaten manna his entire life. Every morning, the same white flakes on the ground. He had never tasted bread made from harvested grain until 3 days ago. And here, enough grain to feed his family for years. Enough to make him wealthy by the standards of a people who had owned nothing for 40 years. His hand moved toward the nearest jar. His fingers brushed the clay rim, still cool. The grain inside was golden and dry and real. And he pulled his hand back. He pulled it back because Joshua had commanded that everything in this city belonged to God, not to be plundered, not to be hoarded. Every jar, every coin, every grain of wheat, transferred from human hands to divine jurisdiction. The Hebrew word was karam, and it did not simply mean destroy. It meant to permanently and irrevocably remove from human use and give entirely to God. Jericho was the first fruits of Canaan, the first city taken in the Promised Land. And like all first fruits, it belonged wholly to the Lord. He let the grain burn. Archaeologists found those jars, large clay storage vessels filled with charred grain, buried in a burn layer several feet thick covering the ruins of the city. The full jars tell 3 stories at once. The attack came right after the spring harvest, exactly when Passover would have occurred. The siege lasted days, not months. The city's food supply was never consumed. And the Israelites obeyed. They did not take the grain. They burned it, just as Joshua commanded. The walls fell outward.
The city burned, the grain turned to ash. And one section of the wall still stood, with a scarlet cord hanging from the window. But here is where the story turns from astonishing to bone-chilling. Rahab survived. She and her family were brought out of the city and placed outside the camp of Israel. But she did not remain outside. Over time, she was grafted into the nation. She married a man named Salmon. She had a son named Boaz, who would marry another outsider, a Moabite woman named Ruth. And the scarlet cord cast a shadow far longer than Rahab could have imagined. The blood on the doorposts in Egypt had saved Israel from the angel of death. The scarlet cord in Rahab's window saved her family from the army of Israel. Both were visible signs. Both required staying inside the marked house. Both separated the living from the dead by nothing more than a choice to believe and a sign to prove it. Two moments in history, two threads of crimson, both pointing forward to something neither Moses nor Rahab could yet see. Boaz and Ruth had a son named Obed. Obed had a son named Jesse, and Jesse had a son named David. The Gospel of Matthew opens with the genealogy of Jesus Christ, and there, in the bloodline of the Messiah, listed by name, without apology, without asterisk, is Rahab. Salmon, the father of Boaz by Rahab, and Boaz, the father of Obed by Ruth, Matthew 1:5. A Canaanite prostitute from a destroyed city, standing in the direct ancestral line of Jesus of Nazareth. The Hedem was designed to eradicate everything in Jericho, but faith opened a door in the wall of judgment, and through that door walked a woman whose blood would flow through the veins of the Son of God. And the connection goes deeper still. Joshua, the man who led Israel through the Jordan into the Promised Land, the man who conquered Jericho not with swords but with faith. His name in Hebrew is Yehoshua. It means Yahweh is salvation. The shortened form is Yeshua, and the Greek translation of Yeshua is Jesus, Jesus. Joshua and Jesus share the exact same name. The man who brought God's people through the river and into the land of promise foreshadows the one who brings God's people through death and into eternal life. The man who saved a sinner by a scarlet cord foreshadows the one who saves all sinners by scarlet blood. The commander who declared, "The Lord has given you the city," before the walls fell, points to the Savior who declared, "It is finished," before death itself collapsed. This is not coincidence. This is design, written into the names, written into the narrative, written into a thin red cord hanging from a window in a wall that should have buried everyone inside it. Sometimes, the thinnest thread between you and everything falling apart is the one thing you chose to believe when no one else around you did.
Here is what Jericho teaches. God stripped everything before he gave victory. Military readiness? Taken. Supernatural provision? Taken. Tactical control? Taken. The right to profit? Taken. When the walls fell, there was nothing left for human beings to claim credit for. No brilliant strategy, no superior weapons, no heroic last stand. Just priests with cracked lips blowing bent horns, soldiers who marched in silence when every instinct told them to scream, and a God who does what he says he will do. The stones still testify. Tel Es Sultan, the massive archaeological mound outside modern Jericho, still holds the evidence. Collapsed walls that fell outward, a burn layer feet thick, charred grain in unbroken jars. The physical record of a city that met a sudden, catastrophic, and fiery end, exactly as the biblical text describes. And somewhere in that rubble, one section of wall stood longer than the rest. One window, one cord,
One family that survived because a woman who had every reason to doubt chose to believe instead. Every person watching this faces walls. Walls that seem permanent. Walls that logic and experience and every voice around you says cannot be broken. And God's answer is the same now as it was 3,400 years ago on the plains of Jericho. Trust me. Obey me. Even when the plan makes no sense. Especially when the plan makes no sense. March when I say march. Be silent when I say be silent. And when I say shout, shout. Because I have already given you the city. What wall in your life are you trying to break with your own strength, when God is asking you to march in silence and trust Him? If this story shook something inside you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. And leave a comment. Tell me, what wall are you facing right now? Because the story of Jericho has one final verse that nobody talks about. After the city burned, after the rubble cooled, after the smoke cleared, Joshua stood among the ruins and spoke a curse. Cursed before the Lord be the man who rises up and rebuilds this city Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn shall he lay its foundation, and at the cost of his youngest son shall he set up its gates. Joshua 6:26. 500 years passed. In 1 Kings 16:34, a man named Hiel of Bethel rebuilt Jericho. He laid the foundation. His firstborn son, Abiram, died. He set up the gates. His youngest son, Segub, died. Exactly as Joshua had spoken. 5 centuries between the curse and the cost, and the word did not return void. The God who broke the walls of Jericho does not forget what He has spoken. Not in 500 years, not in 3,000, not ever. And He still honors the cord.